We begin this hour with more pressure from the United States towards Iran. Now, the Trump administration says it will sanction any country buying Iranian oil starting on May 2nd. But Iran is pushing back, warning it will close the world's busiest oil waterway. RT correspondent Dan Cohen explains what the repercussions could be.
It's the latest step in the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. And it could have a dramatic impact, not only for oil prices, but also for regional and even global stability. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made the announcement this morning, saying the U.S. coordinated the move with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in order to minimize the impact on oil prices around the world.
Our goal has been to get countries to cease importing Iranian oil entirely. Last November, we granted exemptions from our sanctions to 7 countries and to Taiwan. With this is to give our allies and partners to wean themselves off of Iranian oil and to assure a well-supplied oil market. Today, I'm announcing that we will no longer grant any exemptions. We're going to zero.
Of the 7 countries the U.S. had granted waivers to last year, Greece, Italy, and Taiwan have since cut their Iranian oil imports to zero. But China, India, Turkey, South Korea, and Japan won't be so easy. And Iran says the U.S. is overestimating its ability to enforce such sanctions. A senior official called the U.S. weak and shaky and said, quote, "If the world is not supplied with Iran's oil for 2 months, the global economy will be in trouble. And undoubtedly, the U.S. wouldn't be able to make up for the losses." What's more, a commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps warned that the IRGC would block the Strait of Hormuz if Iran is prevented from using it to trade oil with other countries. Just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, a third of the world's oil that moves by sea passes through it every day. Most of the crude oil, not only from Iran, but also from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Iraq, passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet is based in nearby Bahrain and is tasked with protecting Allied commercial ships in the region. Needless to say, its closure could spark military confrontation. While the U.S. and its close allies are on board, other regional and global powers are pushing back. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said the U.S. decision will not serve regional peace and stability, yet will harm Iranian people. Turkey rejects unilateral sanctions and impositions on how to conduct relations with neighbors. Turkey is a major purchaser of Iranian oil and is already under threat of U.S. sanctions for purchasing the Russian S-400 missile defense system. China also denounced the move, saying its cooperation with Iran is open, transparent, lawful, and legitimate, thus it should be respected. It's not the first time Iran has threatened to close the waterway in response to U.S. demands, but this time it could backfire spectacularly. In Washington, Dan Cohen, RT.
To learn more, we're joined by former U.S. Senator and former Governor of Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee. Thank you for joining us, Governor Chafee.
Thank you, Scottie.
Okay, I have to ask, did President Trump have to do this now at this exact moment when there's so many other things going on in the world that this would have an effect on?
Well, my understanding is these waivers were set to expire in early May, May 3rd or something like that. So the deadline was coming up, and so he did act. Caught up in that net, of course, are 3 of our allies, South Korea, who we depend on greatly, and Japan, of course, a strong ally, and also Turkey. We working with the Turks and all the Kurdish issues in the Middle East. Very, very important ally also.
Well, that's the thing. We have trade negotiations already going on with all of those at this point. So before I get to my next question, I just have to ask you, there's some major players within this embargo that this is also going to affect. Why is this a good move right now, or is it not a good move considering all of the trade deals that are still in limbo and have not necessarily been nailed down?
Well, you heard some saying that this is going to rise prices, gas prices, and that's good. For some, those that it's more expensive to extract the oil, such as the Texans. A Texas delegation lobbied President Trump to go ahead with not granting these waivers to these 5 countries. And they said this is good for us because it costs us more to get our oil out of the ground. We need high prices. If the prices are low, it's not cost effective to get the oil out of the ground. So there's some, I think the Russians were happy that the prices are going to go up. So it's not good for the American consumer, but for some of the producers, they're happy to see the higher prices. So that could be a factor here.
Well, it's interesting. And one of the recent criticisms that's come from President Trump, and it's going on in this administration, is their close ties to Saudi Arabia and several of their other deals. Does this make the U.S. and the Saudis even more tightly bound than prior noticed?
Yeah, all these complex strings attached to this decision. Now the Saudis are going to be the ones to be providing, theoretically, oil to China and India. And that's good for them, our ally, and for the war in Yemen and the fight that's going on there. So you have all these strings. Is it the price of oil that makes the Texans happy? Is it the Saudis that want to be able to continue to have resources to continue the war in Yemen? Is it really about Iranian activity and what they're doing around the world? There's so many, whenever oil's involved, it's complex.
And oil's involved, unfortunately, in most of these instances when we're talking about confrontations around the world. I do have to ask, though, the legality of this. Is this not a way that the U.S. is forcing other countries to buy oil from Saudi Arabia and the UAE rather than let those countries make their own deals and their own trades with whomever they wish? Is this allowable under international law? And if it is, why? This seems like this is almost creating a monopoly or a dictatorship of who the United States or any country would preference another country to do their own good and trade with.
I don't have an answer as to the legality of this action, but certainly we're acting as a bully in the world, there's no doubt about that, with our economic strength. And the facts seem to support that we are so strong economically around the world that we do have an effect on even China and India, and we can make them conform to certain behavior just because of these sanctions. I think this could be tested, the strength of our economic strength in issuing these sanctions. The Chinese might just thumb their nose at us and say, no, we're going to continue to buy Iranian oil, and we don't care about your sanctions. So we'll see how this plays out. The same with India, two strong economies that we're kind of meddling in. There's no doubt about that, with our bully tactics,
and that never,
in my view.
Right, and bullying is an interesting word to use for it. You know, up in Congress right now, how do you think this is going over with the congressional delegation, both Republicans and Democrats on the Hill that are going to have to deal with this, whether it be the higher gas prices, because they're going to be the ones answering for it. It's not necessarily going to be the presidents get the phone call. They're immediately, you know, people in the streets are going to turn immediately to people that represent them on the federal level. How do you feel like this is going over on Congress, considering they're going to be the ones answering?
We'll see how that plays out. Of course, in some of the oil-producing states, the North Dakotas and the Montanas with that oil basin up there, the fracking that's going on up there, and of course Texas, Oklahoma, they'll be happy because the higher prices are good for them. But for the American consumer, they're going to be furious. So yes, good question. See how the Congress, senators and congressmen around the country react to as the prices go up all summer.
Well, ultimately, you admitted that the prices will go up at the gas pumps. That's never popular. A lot of people are saying, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people that are on social media saying there's no way that Saudi Arabia can handle the 10%, make up the 10% of the world oil that is going to be needed. Could this administration, could the United States use this as another reason of why they need to have more influence within a country like Venezuela that is oil rich? Could this also be something that could go into another type of market or sort of the relationship that we have with another country that we're in turmoil with right now?
Certainly that's a possibility. But I would say don't forget that all of a sudden we're seeing domestically here in the United States a tremendous increase in our production due to the fracking technology up there in that North Dakota, Montana basin. And so that could all of a sudden get more robust. From my understanding, there's still tremendous reserves there. So you factor in added production there, Venezuela, of course, what happens, the Russians, what they're going to do, as well as Saudi Arabia.
Well, this was just an announcement that came down the pike over the last few hours. You're right. We're going to have to just time will tell. But I know one thing. I'm already going to be upset paying higher gas prices, and I have a feeling a lot of people across this country are going to be just as concerned about it as I am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scottie.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.